So, welcome to our webinar today. For those of you who haven't joined in with one of our webinars before, this is my 7th that I've run now, since the end of March. With Marketer Hub, I used to run live events, sort of 2 to 3 a year, where we'd all meet up, we'd have a presentation, I'd have a bit of a chat. And it was just a chance to meet other marketers, really, because it can be quite lonely in the marketing world, particularly if you're either working on your own or in a team of just yourself. You get a bit lonely. So we started Marketer Hub to be a bit of a resource for marketers, both in terms of learning and networking. And we decided to set up the webinars end of March in response to COVID and the lockdown and everything, just to try and help marketers through. So what we're going to cover today, briefly, we'll just have a quick introduction. We'll then go into why print, and then where print fits in cross-media campaigns, how it fits with digital. Move on to how to write a print brief, so covering what to include, what not to include, etc. Quick overview of the difference between digital and litho, and then end with some creative print ideas. After all this is finished, we'll then have a Q&A. Apologies, it looks like it's dropped off the end there, but it should. The last bullet point should say Q&A session, so we'll have that towards the end. So a quick introduction to Newton Print, for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We are a family-run print company. It started by my dad in 1983, which is a long time ago. I wasn't around, obviously, then. But we like to say that we're a print company with a marketing mindset. So we have on our team a mixture of print experts who've been in the trade for years and marketing experts, qualified marketing experts. So it gives us a nice all-round view, not only what works from a print aspect, but what works from a marketing aspect. And you can check out a bit more about us online, newtonprint.co.uk. As for Marketer Hub, as I went into before, I started it 3 years ago, and there's some social handles to follow as well. Over the next few weeks, I'm hoping to formalize it all a bit, set up an actual website for Marketer Hub. We'll host all of the content, all the events, and lots more. So keep an eye out for that. Should be good. So let's make a start. Why print? And in this, I will go through those 6 points that you can see on your list, just to cover maybe bust some myths, particularly where environment is concerned, and to remind you why print is a good idea. So kicking off with the environment. As you probably know, print tends to get a bad press because it's bad for the environment, and this is because print is a physical thing, excuse me, and you can see that print used to be a tree. You know, the paper used to be a tree, and therefore, cutting down trees increases CO2 emissions, etc. As you can see on the screen there, that little extract from a trade association, the paper, pulp and print sector, which covers everything to do with paper, packaging, newspapers, everything, one of the lowest emitters of greenhouse gases. And that aside, there are huge campaigns and activities and programs that go on to balance the carbon impact, which we'll have a quick look at on the next slide. So there's things like the FSC scheme, and we're signed up to FSC, and that means that we can print the FSC logo on your printed material, but also more importantly, it means that there's traceability, there's accountability, so that if you wanted to, you could literally go back to you could trace back the forest that the trees came from that made up the paper that we printed on. It's that well run, and that is how thorough the process is. So basically what it does, it ensures that all trees used for paper come from a sustainably managed forest, and those forests actually plant more trees than they cut down. Just a few facts on there. I won't read them all out because you can read them there. But that first bullet point there, the average European, according to the research, the amount of paper they consume, it's the equivalent of driving less than 1.5 miles a day. So the environmental impact, the CO2 impact of print per person is actually pretty small compared to some of the other activities we do. There's also a lot of recycling that goes on. So paper is a really, really good product for recycling. It can be recycled more than once in its lifetime. So if you're buying a recycled paper, it could have been recycled 2, 3, 4 times. Obviously, as it goes on, it degrades, so it then ends up as sort of lower quality things like toilet paper and newspaper. But you can get a lot of use out of paper. Quick nod there to the anti-plastic movement as well. We're seeing a massive increase in paper-based packaging. Even in the last 2, 3, 4 months, we've had a massive uplift in the amount of paper and card packaging we've produced. And people are turning to that because they need to be seen to be sustainable. And if you're using completely biodegradable packaging, it's a massive plus. We've just been talking to a local producer of food here, and they've switched to completely biodegradable packaging, so biodegradable films, but everything else is cardboard. And they've run their own composting campaign to show how easy it is to compost and biodegrade cardboard. So I think that's a really, really cool initiative. Last bullet point there is about the ICT industry globally produce the same emissions as the aviation industry. So people tend to think that social media and digital, online, that kind of thing is much more environmentally friendly. There is actually a huge hidden impact of the digital and devices industry, smartphones, computers, that sort of thing. And here I've just taken a quick screenshot of a program that BBC ran earlier in the year. Really, really interesting and eye-opening, because people don't necessarily think of the environmental impact of using a smartphone, using social media. It's got some incredible facts in there. Even, a single tweet that's reshared however many times, it uses a huge amount of data. So you're thinking of the energy required to run screens, but then you've got the hidden cost of smartphones. So they generally have a life of 2 or 3 years. After that, what happens to them? You've got all these precious metals and toxic chemicals and things that make up a smartphone and a smartphone battery that have to be discarded. So have a look at that program sometime. It's really, really interesting. I'll just pop a link. So that's that. Have a look at that. It's really, really interesting. There's a bit more there about the FSC accreditation. Plenty of printers have it. We're one of them. We are certified. We pay an annual subscription to be able to use the FSC logo. We also use things like vegetable-based inks. We have low chemistry plate processing technology here. So we're moving more and more. We're also looking to become carbon neutral as well, which is one of our big projects for this year. So that's going to be really exciting. So hopefully that's just shown that print isn't necessarily bad for the environment, and it's by no means the worst. In fact, I would go so far as saying that it's making the print industry and the paper industry is making so many advances that it's possibly the most eco-friendly. Moving on quickly, we'll cover GDPR very briefly. As it says there, the DMA actually recommend using mail for re-permissioning. So this was big, obviously, when GDPR came into force a couple of years ago. But people were far more receptive of mail to be re-permissioned, and that means that you get them to sign up again to your database. But also it's the one that's recommended by the ICO. So they actually quote within their instructions, you won't need consent for postal marketing, and there's less regulations on mail. And this is specifically useful when you're using unaddressed mail, because of course you're not using anyone's data. So there's a number of ways you can use unaddressed mail to send mail into homes. You can use tools such as Royal Mail Door to Door, and they're partially addressed mail, and you can get quite a good bit of refining there. So you're refining by postcode sector. You can start to nail it down by proximity to your location or a school location or some sort of catchment area like that. You can also use local distribution companies, and if you're printing with us, if you're doing direct mail with us, we have partnered with a few around and about, and they will literally offer a pretty reasonably priced service where they will drop your leaflets around doors. And the advantage of that is that your leaflet is going in without other mail, so it's going in on its own. It's going into a letterbox on its own, and it's not cluttered. It's not lost amongst a pile of bills and whatever else, Pizza Hut leaflets, that type of thing. It's really, really effective. So have a think about that. And of course, it's GDPR friendly because you're not using anyone's data. Digital overload. This is quite a current topical concern for families in particular. Kids getting too much screen time. Of course, has health issues, social issues. And I believe that print is a really good opportunity for brands to show that they are doing something to make a difference. So by using print, you're not encouraging screen time. So using print for your content, using print for your marketing, your advertising. There's an example of a housing company, Redborough Homes. They produced a branded children's book all about the moving process, and the idea was to overcome some of the fears of moving to a new home and that sort of thing. And they actually printed their own children's book, and I thought that was a really, really, really good idea, because you're taking some really useful content offline and you're producing something that will be shared around the family and kept as well. And it's a branded piece of content. Really, really powerful. There's some facts on there just to show how important it is, to switch off from digital. And that applies even to the younger generations too. I've got some stats later on about how the younger generation appreciate offline marketing. Because you might think that the young up and comings, millennials and all that, only want to use digital. And in one sense, yeah, they do use a lot of digital, but also they are really, really receptive to receiving mail. The other thing, of course, is that if you're sending out mail, you own that space. You haven't got ads bombarding and distracting. If you're sending a piece of mail, that their full concentration is on that. I've got some slides here from apologies. Sorry, my slides are a bit mixed up. That wasn't mixed up. There we go. Return on investment next. Some stats on here, mainly pulled from Royal Mail Market Reach, and they do loads of research into return on investment, and these are averages, but it just goes to show how effective print can be, both in terms of the income, return on investment, but also the response rate. And if you look at the second to last bullet point there, it shows that young people, 18 to 29-year-old age group, really respond well to receiving something in the post, because it's so rare and it's something that's so uncluttered. It feels traditional. It feels trustworthy. I've got some stats on here which I'll probably skip through, but you can get these. You can get this whole slide deck in the handout section of the seminar, so you can digest it at your leisure. Sensory experience of print. Now, obviously, print is a very, very tactile medium. You actually, you hold it in your hand. You can smell the print. You can see what's, you can see the quality. You can read the content, and they are massive factors. But also, sound plays a part. The sound of a book being flicked, and even if you're clever enough with your design, and I'll show you that in the next slide, you can imply sound. Now, this is an out-of-home campaign run by Coca-Cola. And I don't know if you can see it, it's a bit small on the screen. You'll be able to see it in the slide. The first one on the top left, it just says, in fact, they all say, try not to hear this. And the whole idea is, try as you might, you can actually hear it just by looking at the visuals. You can hear the bottle top being unpopped, the can being opened. You can hear the fizzing of the Coke. That's a really, really clever campaign to capture the sensory experience of an advert. And by doing that, you massively increase the return on investment and the effectiveness of the campaign. Moving on to fragrance, obviously that's an area that we are specialists in, scratch and sniff and that type of thing, and it really is effective at stimulating memory recall. You've probably experienced it yourself when you've had when you've smelt something that suddenly transports you back 20, 30, 50 years, depending on how old you are. So it might be, the smell of fresh cut grass, or it might be a particular smell that reminds you of your grand's house or something like that. And it's really, really powerful in stimulating the memory. In fact, some teachers have started using candles and reed diffusers when they're doing revision lessons, and then they'll use that same scent in the exam to stimulate recall. And there's heaps of studies out there, and it literally works. It sounds crazy, but it's really, really effective. So using fragrance within print, even if you're using it subconsciously, so that the fragrance isn't necessarily directly related, can be really powerful. Trust. Fake news is massive, and it's a massive issue. And brands are desperate to be believed and be believable. Some of those stats there just show how trustworthy the print medium is, and this is really, really important when you're a brand that needs to. Any brand needs to show that they're trustworthy, but particularly if you're in something like professional services or finance, you need to be believable. And 87% in the Raw Mail Market Reach study believe mail to be believable, compared to just 48% for email, and that's a big difference. The trouble is that there's so much stuff online, and if you've got something in your hand, it appears to be much more believable with your audience. I was at a print conference a year or so ago, and I heard from the head of marketing at Breast Cancer Care, and they actually brought along a cancer patient who had sorry, it wasn't Breast Cancer Care, it was Macmillan Cancer Support. They brought along a patient who received support from Macmillan, and this lady, this cancer patient, she went over how valuable the printed content was from Macmillan, because it meant that she could take it away, read it in her own time, in her own space, on her own, without having to worry about whether it's trustworthy, which can be the issue with online, and without being bombarded by other ads, which could be insensitive. They could be just the wrong thing at the wrong time. So she was going over how valuable that was, and I thought that was really, really interesting, because making customers feel valued is really, really important, particularly if you're trying to move away from the sort of corporate image. So that's where print can be really, really helpful. And there's some more stats here, which you can read at your leisure if you download the slides, on how mail makes people feel valued compared to some of the other mediums. And here, this slide here shows how how this applies across the generations. So even quite young people are really, really responsive to print, receptive. So where does print fit in cross-media campaigns? First, you need to think about positioning, and this applies to any medium you're using. So where does print fit in your marketing mix, and where does it fit in your customer journey? So think about all the touch points, think about how your customers arrive with you, how you take them through the journey to become a customer and then to become a returning customer. And it's really, really helpful to build a map, and I'll go through some examples in the next slide or two. But think about your different customer personas as well. And I know this is something I've covered in previous webinars and live Market Hub sessions, that you might have 3 to 4 or even more different types of customer. And if you dig down into those, they might all have a slightly different journey. So they might arrive with you differently. Some might arrive with inbound. Some might arrive as a result of an ad campaign. So think about those different personas and where print fits. And think about not just where print fits, but which medium is the best for each touch point in your customer journey. Because it might be that, email or online advertising might be better at a certain point stage, and print works further down the line. So let's just have a quick look at a couple of examples. Here's one of our main, this is a process map that we use for inbound clients, and we get a lot of inbound new clients through Google. So they'll search for a particular print item, and they'll get in touch either by web form or the online chat or an email. We'll then generally email them back or phone them just to clarify some of the information. They're usually looking for a quote or samples. Then send them a quote by email, but also follow up with samples by mail, and then follow that up by phone or email. Then there'll be, if required, some further mail further down the line just to cement that relationship. And then it's usually at that point that we win the client. So that's just a process map. One example. Here's another one. Apologies, I'm pressing the wrong slide again. I'm trying to use 2 different slides today, just to 2 different screens, make it a bit easier, because this platform I use isn't the best for slides. So that was the one I was talking about earlier. This one here might be a slightly different customer journey. So you start with a piece of direct mail. They then encourage to visit a website, and then follow you on social media. You get into conversation. You might then invite them to a podcast, and keep engaging with them via email, and that ultimately results in a sale. So there's just 2 examples there of how print can be used alongside digital, but also as part of your customer flow, customer journey. Content marketing. Now, the majority of content is online, blogs, whether it's podcasts, blogs, white papers, all these sorts of things. But I think it's a really, really good idea to take your content offline. It's less crowded, and also, as I've put up there, nice looking print is shared. You only need to look at Instagram or Pinterest and see the amount of sharing people have done of gorgeous print content, and it really, really works with the younger age groups as well. So think about content marketing. Some examples where you can use it in magazines. So whether that's an internal magazine, if you're a large company, to promote the brand internally, or an external magazine promoting content from your industry. You might want to do lookbooks, and that's particularly good for visual companies. So whether you're selling something like interior furniture, or you're selling clothes, or you're selling any kind of product, creating a lookbook. We've created some really gorgeous lookbooks over the years, and they're really, really popular because they stick around and people like to pick them up and flip through them. Great idea to turn catalogs into a hybrid as well. So products, that people tend to browse through, which is generally B2C type scenarios. It can be really, really good to produce an actual printed catalogue. You look at Argos as one example. They've got such a good blend. So people browse through the catalogue, particularly kids, browse through the catalogue, and they then go online to buy. Because online can be quite clunky to browse through sometimes, and a lot of people tend to prefer to browse through an actual catalogue. I've put a point on there about content becoming a revenue stream. A lot of companies have actually turned it into a revenue stream, generating stream. So they produce such good content that they actually sell it. I think I've got some examples later on as well. And nostalgia, it's such a big such a big factor for print. People like to be taken back, particularly during times of crisis like this. People like to fall back on times, happier times, or times in their childhood, and print can provide that nostalgia. Got an example on the next slide of John Deere, who produce a magazine called The Fur, and they've been producing this since 1895. They distribute it now into about 100 countries, 14 different languages. And as you can probably see in that image, there's no branding at all. There's barely any John Deere branding in the whole thing. And their aim is to become the go-to publication for farmers. And I think it's really clever that they're showing, rather than just telling, that they really understand farmers. And they're using that to build their brand and become the go-to brand for farmers. Very clever stuff. I've got a quote. Yeah, I've got a quote on the next slide. They did a study, and 40% of readers say that they read every single word. That's incredible. There's a really good quote there as well. I won't read it out to you, but you can read it later on at your leisure if you download the slides. Next slide here, a couple of different examples of magazines. Airbnb. They produce a magazine to encourage research into locations. They do all sorts of I think the right word. They do all sorts of articles and in-depth analysis of different locations, different types of houses. Really, really good content. The other one there, Bumble, is a dating app. I've used it. But they also publish printed content. And the interesting thing here is both of these would class themselves as very much digital platforms. So they're using print to promote their digital platforms, which is really, really interesting. An interesting quote at the top there too about the Airbnb magazine, which was from a journalist, just to show the impact of it. Last example in this section is Amazon. This was a campaign they did in response to Toys R Us going to administration just over a year ago, just before Christmas, and they produced this magazine which you could actually scan with the Amazon app. You could scan various items and it would take you to the online page where you could buy. Really, really clever. It's just another example of digital companies using print. So moving on to direct mail. As I said earlier, think about where you use direct mail and at what points within your customer acquisition journey, and then find ways to reach your audience. So use your data, make sure your data is up to date, but use it. And Royal Mail have loads of tools to help make sure your data is up to date. So they can do deceased checking and home movers checking and all that sort of thing. Really, really useful. And it's all free. Most of it's free, Royal Mail offer. You can also target by postcode, like I was saying earlier. You can target by all sorts of criteria. Really, really useful stuff. I've got an example here, just a quick one, of KitKat. Really clever campaign. They sent out these direct mail things that were supposed to look like a Royal Mail "We've missed you" card, and the whole idea was to get them on the back. It was all these instructions that you take this card into a store and you can claim a free KitKat. Really, really clever. Just a very simple. I mean, it wouldn't cost them much at all. It's just a little postcard at the end of the day, but it's really, really clever. Another example here of one of the biggest digital companies, Google, using print to advertise their AdWords. Now, if that isn't crazy, what is? They're using print to advertise an online advertising platform. But it just goes to show that print, it really, really works. Google wouldn't use it if it didn't work. Moving on to data. Make sure your data is up to date. Really, really important. You can waste a lot of money posting to people who are deceased or moved house. For those of you who are on our Royal Mail webinar a few weeks ago, I think it's something like 15,000 home movers every month across the UK. So people do move a lot more regularly than you think. It's really important to have up-to-date data. And then you can use it to personalize your print. So not only with, Dear John, you can produce some really highly personalized direct mail. And I've got an example here on the next slide. This is a campaign that we ran for a holiday company down here in South Devon. So they run self-catering holiday cottages. And what they did with their data is they produced a series of mailers, and each mailer was completely personalized, including the imagery and content. So they used some of our software. For example, if a person visited a certain town every year, then they would put their favorite town on the front cover. Then inside, the content would be tailored, so whether they're looking for pet-friendly holidays because they have a dog, or whether they're looking for kid-friendly holidays because they have a family, or whether they're elderly and looking for peace and quiet, golfing, anything like that. All of this data that they already had, they used it with our software to produce mailers that were highly personalized. So that's how powerful data can be if you get it right. And it can be really simple to use as well. So there's no need for bland run-of-the-mill one-size-fits-all print anymore. Creativity. Design plays a massive part. You can have a printed mailer that's printed beautifully on a really nice stock with a gorgeous lamination and foil box, but if it's been designed with low resolution images or put together in Word, it will look really naff. So it's really, really important, we always say, to get your printer and your designer working together. And if you get your printer involved at an early design stage, it really helps both in timing, but also in getting things right, because nothing more annoying than when your designer designs something that looks amazing, and then you find either that it can't be printed or that it costs a fortune to print. So that's one of the reasons why it's really, really good idea to get your design and your printer talking together. We've found we've had a massive increase over the past 2 or 3 years in customers getting us on at a much earlier stage. So not getting us on when the artwork's ready, but getting us on board when they're starting to plan, and we'll talk to their designer and the customer. So it's like a three-way thing, and it works really, really well. So think about your design. Like I was going over before, clever design can really make a piece of print connect with the emotions and connect with the senses. So it doesn't need to cost a huge amount. You can use standard, ordinary print, but if you've got a really cleverly designed piece, it will really make a difference. And then you can start to play with the print as well. So you can start to be creative with using different shapes, using pop-ups, using scratch and sniff, using peel and reveal, all that sort of thing. And you can use that to really punch home your message. Got some examples in the next couple of slides. See, top left, some really nice foil block. You've got different shapes, top right and bottom left. The bottom right campaign is one that we did for a holiday company. They specialize in Asian tours. So they sent out this piece of direct mail to lapsed customers who'd previously visited Asia. And what they did was they put a scratch and sniff panel on the front, which smelled of Asian cuisine. So it's like a kind of lemongrass scent. And it was really, really clever, really well run campaign. It got them some really good results because it was something slightly different, but it also it captured people's emotions. It captured people's nostalgic memories. So they're, do you remember how nice that holiday made us feel? So it's all emotional. Really, really clever campaign. Some more on my next slide too. Top right is a campaign we did earlier this year for Moonpig. They partnered with KFC and they did this PR stunt for Valentine's Day where they produced a limited edition set of scratch and sniff KFC Valentine's cards. And it really did smell of KFC. It's a crazy campaign, but it was really clever. They sold out these cards within a couple of days and they got so much PR coverage. If you Google it, you'll see it everywhere. Some other examples, we've got a pop-up there on the top left. They're really, really good for capturing attention. So if you're doing a sort of cold or first time campaign, or a campaign to lapsed customers, grab a bit of attention. Really, really clever. On the bottom right there is a lookbook that we produced for a footwear company. So they were like a really rustic and organic brand, and they wanted it to look rustic and organic. So we used craft paper, and we applied their logo in spot UV only, no print, so it looked like a wet footprint, which is the whole idea around their logo. Really clever campaign. So moving on to how to brief a print project. Some tips. A list of things there that you should always include if you don't want your printer phoning you up and saying, "Oh, what about this?" Because we know how annoying it is. Sorry about printers. But it's really helpful if you include all this stuff, all of those things from the word go. And think about what happens before, so how your artwork's created. Like I was saying before, get your printers involved and engaged with your designers so that there's no mixed messages, and so that you get the best deal. But also think about how you're going to store your print, how it's going to be delivered, does it need to be posted, and then timing. Talk to your printers, and particularly if something's needed in a rush, let them know as early as possible. Give your printers as much notice as possible, because that can really help you, and it can actually save costs too if you're well prepared. I know that print sometimes it's really last minute, but if you have your printers engaged with your designers, then gives much better heads up, and it will really, really help. I mean, it could save you hundreds or thousands of pounds if you're mailing something out. It simply means that you can use an economy mail rather than first class, as an example. So quantity. Think about how many you need. It can be really tempting to just print how many you need, but think about the future. Think about if you might need to use more. So maybe print, 18 months worth rather than 6 months worth. That gives you a massive benefit in terms of price per unit, as you will have seen. And ask your printer to quote for a range of quantities too. So rather than just say, I want 500, ask them to quote for 500, 1,000, 2,000, and you can engage whether it's going to be worth your while. But of course, that's only if you need it. So if it's a limited time, or you think artwork's going to be updated, then it's definitely better to print few so that you're not wasting. Another great thing to do is combine print orders. So for example, if you have a range of leaflets on different topics, it's a really, really good idea to combine them and print them all at once rather than in dribs and drabs. You'll save a lot of money that way, and particularly if you can print them in even quantities as well. So 4 designs together or 6 designs together, as opposed to 3 or 5, for example. Size matters. So the common sizes are common for a reason. They offer the maximum efficiency when we're printing. There are some sizes that are slightly unusual, that don't cost a huge amount extra or even nothing extra, that can just help your print stand out a bit. They're not the standard size, and they don't cost a huge amount extra. So ask your printer. I've just given a quick overview on the next slide of how print is produced. So we print on large sheets, and this is an example of an A4 leaflet. We print it on an oversized A2 sheet, and then we cut it down to A4, and that obviously is why it's so effective, because you're printing 4 at once rather than individually. And that also shows where if you've got 2 or 4 different designs, you can really save some costs, because you can print them all together on one sheet, and you're printing considerably less sheets and you're wasting a lot less. Next slide, I've got an example of how booklets printed. I haven't explained it very well here, but basically what would happen is that it's printed like that. This is a booklet cover, and then folded horizontally across the middle and printed back to back, so that it's a really cost-effective way to print. It's a really quick, fast way to print. So that just shows how booklets printed very briefly. Number of pages, important thing to think about. If you're printing a staple booklet, always make sure it's a multiple of 4 pages. If you're printing, bigger pagination and it's perfect bound, you can get away with multiples of 2, but it always needs to be a multiple of 4 if it's either folded or if it's stapled. There are exceptions to this. For example, you can print a 6-page or an 8-page A4 roll fold in some scenarios, or A5. But as a general rule, stick to a 4-page multiple if you're printing a booklet. I've put a comment there on A4 booklets being really canonical multiples of 8. So if you're designing a new booklet and you're not sure whether to add an extra 4 pages on or take off, just have a chat with your printer, because it's very often the case, as I've put on there, a 48-pager can actually work out, sorry, 52, that's the wrong way around, 52 can often work out cheaper than a 48, just because of the way we print. Paper types. 2 main paper types are coated, which is gloss silk or a matte coated, or an uncoated. Gloss and silk, as you probably have seen, they give really good color representation, so they don't absorb so much of the color compared to an uncoated, which feels nice and natural, but it does reduce and dull down the intensity of colors. And if you're not sure how this is going to come out, have a chat with us, because we've got a little swatch that shows the same image printed on uncoated compared to gloss and silk, and you can see the difference really vividly there. Think also about consistency. So if you're using coated and uncoated, so you might use uncoated for some of your leaflets and then coated for some of your brochures, the brand colors are going to look really different. So try and avoid that where you can. Try and use the same type of paper throughout all your publications. And then think about thickness too. Your printer's going to know best, but if you want to try and, again, keep it consistent throughout your brand, but also think about the balance between the quality and the cost. And as I put on there, most printers offer free done as we do. So if you're not sure, you're printing a booklet and you want to try out a couple of different paper combinations, ask your printer for a dummy, and then you can actually feel what it's going to feel like. Special papers are available too, so you can get, embossed, you can get all range of GF Smith papers, which are gorgeous but very expensive, but they are really, really nice for something that's a little bit special. So whether it's a brochure cover for a really, really high-end product campaign, or a unique piece of direct mail, or an invitation that you want to get good engagement with, think about some sort of special paper, because they're really, really effective. They're very, very gorgeous, and often you'll find that if you're sending out something that's really, really nice on a really nice stock, people will pass it around, and they'll also share it socially as well. They'll take photos, share it on Instagram, Pinterest, etc. In terms of the print method, obviously I'm going to go into digital versus litho in a bit more detail later, but as a rule, 500 copies and less will be printed digitally. This will vary depending on how many pages, etc., but that's as a general rule. And it's a really good idea to ask your printer, if you're not fussed whether it's printed litho or digital, ask your printer to recommend, because printers are notorious for just taking your spec literally, even when there's some better printing method which would save you cost, etc. Litho is always slightly higher quality than digital. Digital has come a long way and it's really good these days, but litho is slightly higher quality. But if you're not sure, ask for samples. Spot colors, these are generally for if you've got a particular brand color and you're really, really keen on keeping it consistent throughout all of your literature and stationery. As I said before, uncoated versus coated, you're going to get variation in color anyway, even if you're using spot color. But they can be really, really powerful, and you can get some really nice, punchy, vibrant, fluorescent colors. You can get metallic colors, really, really useful there. But remember that it does add to the cost. And in some cases, some spot colors aren't much different to the CMYK equivalent visually. So ask your printer to have a look, because we have Pantone books where you can compare the Pantone color, spot color, and the CMYK equivalent. and you can quickly see whether there's much difference or not. So have a chat with your printer about that. Moving on to finishes. Obviously, you need to decide if you want to embellish your print in some way. So whether you're laminating either to protect the brochure cover or to make something feel a bit special. So whether it's soft touching. Also think about whether your print has a lot of dark colouring. So you might have for example, a brochure cover that's all dark navy blue with the text reversed out in white. In that case, it's a really good idea to use an anti-scuff matte laminate because you'll protect it far better from scratches, fingerprints, dust and dirt than if you're just using a standard matte lamination. So think about binding too. There's a few different binding styles. Obviously, the main ones are perfect bound and saddle stitched. But there are limitations in terms of number of pages for both. So have a chat with your printer whether it's actually fit for purpose and what's the most cost effective for your publication too. And if you're in doubt, just ask for more than one price. So a price for saddle stitch compared to perfect bound or wire bound, for example. Ask your printer, that's what they're there for. And ask for samples so you can see and feel what things feel like. And then lastly, in the print brief section is delivery. And I know I dipped into this a little earlier on, but think about how they're going to be delivered and stored. So you might want to print in bulk to take advantage of economies of scale so that the unit costs are lower. But you need to think about where you're going to store them. And for example, we have storage and a sort of stock online picking system for customers who want to print in bulk but don't have the space to store. But then also you might want your print to mail out, and we can get hold of some really, really good postage discounts because of our connections and because the volume of mail that we're posting out. We're posting out tens of thousands of items every month. So have a chat with us if you want to talk through some postage options. It could well be that you'll save a huge amount of money posting through us or your printer rather than doing it all yourself in a franking machine. Think about the weight too if you're posting out. Talk to your printer and get samples. It's a really, really big thing because you might be 2 grams over the postage threshold and it costs you an extra several £100 in postage. Nothing more annoying because there's nothing you can do if it's too late. So talk to your printer before and make sure that you get things like that checked off. So the last section is just a brief look at the difference between digital and litho. Obviously, there's a cost implication. So if you're printing, 50 up to a few hundred, it's going to be much cheaper to print digitally. Litho then becomes more cost effective when you're doing larger runs, so 500 to 1,000 and up. There's also quality to think of. Litho is always higher quality. Digital these days, and with the digital presses that we have, it's really good. It's much, much better than it used to be, but it's definitely just not quite as good as litho. And then think about the timing too. Digital is much faster to set up and run. So if you're needing something, small run of something quickly, digital is the best way to go. Quick look at where digital print isn't quite so good. Long runs, as I said before, it's not economical for printing long runs, and it doesn't save time. In fact, it takes longer for longer runs. So that's where litho is better. Uncoated paper is another thing. If you're using uncoated, digital can tend to leave a sheen on the where the ink is. It's much reduced again compared to what it used to be, but it definitely is there. And then if you're printing large areas of single color, so for example, if you have a page that's got an all over light gray, for example, it's definitely better quality printed litho because digital can be a little inconsistent. But the beauty of digital is that it's really easy, and we usually offer free pre-production proofs so that you can actually see what it's going to turn out like, and that's one big advantage of digital. So that wraps up my presentation. And it's now time for any questions, if anyone has any. I can see that there's one on so far from Mickey Cox. Pantone coated and uncoated. Yes, that is why. Pantone have done a lot of work to try and ensure that colours are consistent when it comes to coated versus uncoated, but it's still not perfect, I'm afraid to say. There's always a difference between coated and uncoated. Uncoated basically has, as it says on the tin, no coating on the surface, so the ink tends to sink in a bit. And that means that the colours are slightly dulled, so it's very, very difficult to replicate the same effect uncoated. Questionnaire from Craig: what's the minimum print run you can do? 1. We can print as few as 1. It depends on what you need. Obviously, it's much more cost effective to print more, but yeah, we have both digital and litho print facilities here, so we can print as few or as many as you need. Any more questions? It looks like that's it for questions as far as I can see. Unless there's any more that come in the next minute or so, I think that probably wraps up our webinar for today. So as I said, if you head over to the handout section, which should be in the top right in the panel there, you can download the slides. If you're having trouble or you can't find it, drop me an email or a LinkedIn message and I'll happily send them over to you. But hopefully that's been helpful. Hopefully you found some use in that. Stay safe as ever. Hope you managed to, or we all managed to get through this time. One thing I've definitely noticed is an increase in marketing folk on LinkedIn and other social platforms saying that they are being asked to do more. And you're seeing job briefs for marketing managers, and they're looking for marketing managers with a skill set ranging from social media and website backend management to marketing, research, strategy, planning, and there's no people that cover that. So yeah, it is a difficult time for marketers. We definitely understand, but stay safe. Get in touch if there's anything you want me to cover in these webinars, because I'm keen to continue them. And if there's any pressing topics or subjects that you'd really like to learn about, but in the meantime, we really look forward to being able to get back to our live networking events when we can actually meet in person. In the meantime, stay safe, and I look forward to our next webinar. Thanks for joining. Goodbye.